Good morning, class. This is our next lecture on business communication, and our topic today is barriers and gateways to communication. So we'll start here now. It is understandable by now that no organization can think of its existence without effective communication. Today, most of the managers spend more than 60% of their time in communication with others. This is an estimated time a manager spends communicating to get the work done. So, as told in my previous classes, previous lectures, I told you that communication, how important communication is. And today, organizations cannot think of existence without effective communication. Somebody is working in India in the same organization while somebody is working in the USA. So how do they communicate? How do they work towards achievement of the goal of the organization? It's not their individual goals, it's the goal of the organization that they're working towards. So it is very important to communicate. We've done it, we've heard it before, as it says that managers today spend 60%, more than 60% of the time in communication with others. So by this we understand how important it is. Procedure, rules, and rather the software that people are working on is important. Yes, it is important because they have to know about their product, they have to have product knowledge, but communicating effectively is very important. This is barriers to communication. What do we understand by a barrier? I understand a barrier as something which is an obstacle which stops. So let's see what are the barriers to communication. Barrier can be defined, this is the definition, as a fence or other obstacle that prevents movement or access. Yes, it can be something which stops, it's an obstacle. So by barriers to communication, we understand that it is something that impedes flow of effective communication. It stops the flow of effective communication. Barriers to communication can be classified as external factors. These are some of the factors, some of the things that stop effective communication. External factors such as semantic and emotional. By semantic, we understand something which is linguistic, which has a language problem. For example, you're speaking to a French person and you're speaking in English while French speaking their national language. They are they do not have rather good vocabulary in English. So if you speak to them in English, would they understand? No. Probably they might, but would the communication be effective? I don't think so. So this is what semantic might understand. It might be language problem. Emotional. Emotional can be something emotional, we all understand, something related to our minds, to our hearts, which we think is correct. Some of the examples can be premature evaluation. For example, somebody is telling us something, somebody's giving a brief about an idea, our manager is giving a brief about an idea, and we already have it in our mind that, okay, this person is telling us this thing, we already know it. This is premature evaluation. I know it more than this manager. I know my work. So this can be a barrier to communication because you already think you know it. However, it is possible that you don't know. You don't pay attention to it. You give undue reliance in the organization. There is an undue reliance on written words. So a thing that could have been done orally is being done by writing, in writing. So these are some of the emotional factors: organizational factors, policy, rules and regulations, complexities, relationships, facilities. So policy, how can policy become a barrier in communication? Uh, as I mentioned, something in organization, they have a policy, they have rules for everything. For example, in an organization, there is a policy that every communication should be in writing, okay? So the manager would send you in writing. However, some things can be can be given, can be, or rather can be communicated orally. The effect which an oral communication would have, probably a written communication may not have. So there are times when people or management should deviate from policy. Probably it can do some good to the organization, but if it is a very strict rule, it may become a barrier. Again, rules may be very rigid, and sometimes, as it is a saying, rules are meant to be broken. So, or rather promises. So rules, what is rules? It's a promise in an organization that we would adhere to it. So sometimes it should be broken. If not, if it is very rigid, it may become a barrier. It may impede communication. Complexities, yes, complexities definitely does impede communication. It is a barrier. Why? If there are 5 managers, there are CEOs, if the hierarchical hierarchy in an organization uh, is there, and there are too many superiors to a subordinate, this can be a barrier to communication, because the subordinate would not communicate effectively. There may be umpteen reasons to that, but they may stop their communication. Relationships, then facilities, there should be enough things available to communicate. For example, there should be a telephone, there can be a stationery should be available. These are available, certainly they are available in organization. However, if it is not available in a proper manner, this can definitely be a barrier to communication. Now, for example, I have to send an email to my CEO of the organization, and he's waiting for my reply, and I start typing the email, and here goes the internet connection. So what happens? I am unable to communicate with him, and this may have a wrong impression on him. So this is to understand, these are the organizational factors that may impede communication. Personal factors, there are personal barriers, barriers in superiors. How can there be barriers in superiors? Superiors as in the management, the higher management, the manager. There are some times wherein there is a person he might be capable, but not as capable as a subordinate. Probably subordinates, they are working on the ground, they know the ground reality, so they may have more product knowledge than a manager. So why can superiors have this kind of rather they can have this kind of what to say, they can not communicate, they can stop communication, effective communication. Why? They have a fear, they have a fear of challenge. A manager is giving a brief to his team, and there is a team member who has more knowledge. He may sometimes say something that the manager may not like, so the manager would feel that his authority is being challenged, and he may stop some of the communications, he may stop some of the information from being sent to the subordinates. Again, sometimes subordinates may feel they may have lack of incentives. Why would they have lack of incentives? Because they may feel that again, if the manager stops some communication, some information being sent to the subordinates, or the subordinate gives some valuable information, some valuable thing that can be rather what to say, a subordinate gives something, rather tells something which can be good for the organization, and the manager doesn't pay heed to it, the manager doesn't reply to it. So this becomes demotivating sometimes for the subordinates, and they may be unwilling going forward, they may be unwilling to communicate, and because they have no incentive, they gave a very good thing to the organization, they gave an information that could be good for the organization, and they didn't have any incentive for that. So this becomes again a barrier, because they would not communicate further, they would be indifferent, they would have an indifferent attitude. Okay, so we have understood what gateways to communicate, sorry, what barriers to communication is. We come to now to gateways to communication. Developing and maintaining a system of good communication is the primary job of any executive. So it is essential on the part of the management to overcome the above mentioned barriers. It is understood that overcoming all the barriers may not be possible, yet action should be taken to minimize the effects of the barriers to a good extent. So we understand there are many barriers. You don't, if the receiver doesn't want to listen, the sender is sending a message, the receiver doesn't want to listen. So what happens? This is barrier. This is a barrier. This is an intentional barrier. So it really cannot be removed altogether. But there are gateways, there are things that should be taken care of, which can reduce a lot of barriers to communication. Let's see what they are. Below are some of the ways through which barriers to communication can be removed. Okay, so the first says the organizational policy should be clear, and it should encourage communication within all departments. So it is understood communication through proper channel is necessary. However, sometimes it may become imperative to deviate from the proper channel to allow free flow of communication. As I mentioned earlier, it is necessary to communicate through proper channel. If the organization says that it should be through a written, it should be in a written format, through email, so it should be through email. But sometimes it becomes necessary to communicate, to deviate from that proper channel. A manager is standing besides me. He can tell me orally what he wants, but the organization wants him to write an email, so he will write an email to him. So sometimes there can be a deviation, and the organization should allow it. Organizations should have adequate facility for promoting communication. However, it should also be looked at the facilities provided are being used. The higher management should support their subordinates to use the facilities. I have seen in many companies they have portals, they have internal portals wherein the subordinates can communicate with the hierarchy, with the CEOs, with the CFOs of the company. So these are the facilities. The facilities have been provided. This is very good for the company. These facilities have been provided, but it also has to be checked whether these facilities are being used. Communication is an interpersonal process, so the organizational environment should be made more intimate and personal. This would encourage communication within departments. There should be a continuous check of evaluating the flow of communication. This helps in identifying the problems and the causes, and thus can help in adopting corrective actions. So yes, there has to be a continuous check how the communication is flowing. Are there any barriers? How can we overcome these barriers? There should be a continuous check on these. these are some of the commandments of good communication. What the sender can follow, what the sender can, while sending communication, what he or she can do to make the communication effective. With the gateways to communication, the process of communication can be made effective. Yes, we understand that. However, the communicator or the sender may take some specific steps to make it more effective by following the below 10 commandments. So this is for the sender to follow. Examine the true purpose of each communication. Clarify your ideas before communicating. When appropriate, consult with others before communicating. Whether a verbal or written communication, edit mercilessly, make every word count. What do we understand by this? I write an email, I'm the sender. I write an email, one-page email. I'm sending it to the person who has to work on it. Does it really make sense sending one-page email? If it can be made short, make it brief, make it concise, make every word count. So this is what it means. The sender should know how to make every word count. You cannot act foolish while communicating. Always consider the total physical human setting. You are speaking in front of intellectuals, in front of economists. You cannot speak as if you're speaking in front of children. So you have to see what the setting is, where you are speaking, in front of what kind of people you are speaking. Consider the overtones as well as the content, your gestures, the content, your verbal, non-verbal gestures, your facial gestures, your tone, your body language, and as well as the content of what you are speaking about. Seek feedback, summarize and confirm. Definitely, as I mentioned earlier in our last chapter, feedback is very important because that would let you know, that would let the sender know whether the receiver has received the message and has interpreted it correctly. Ensure that your actions, attitudes support each communication. Seek not only to be understood but to understand. Be a good listener. Yes, definitely. If sender is sending and they want the receiver to understand, interpret it correctly, they should also be a good listener. They should be ready for a feedback. Communicate for the future as well as today. We all understand that? So this is the conclusion. It can be concluded that there can be umpteen barriers to communication. However, by following the 10 commandments, the sender can send an effective communication, and by paying attention, the receiver can understand it effectively. Certainly, we now understand that it is very important for the sender also to understand how the receiver may understand the information, how the receiver may interpret the information, whether you are sending it in a format which the receiver can understand or not. So it should be clear, it should be in simple words. It's not necessary to deliberately use very hard vocabulary or very words that the receiver, where you are sending, may not be able to understand. Be simple, be clear, be concise. So this is what the barrier, this is what can stop, or rather can, these are the gateways to communication. These are some of the questions here, people. You can work on it, and I'll be back soon with another lecture. Thank you.